The SOLAS Chapter 2.2 Fire Protection, Fire Detection, and Fire Extinction elaborates on the detailed fire safety protection and specific measures for passenger ships, cargo ships, and tankers. This chapter applies to all ships irrespective of type which was built on or after 1st July of 2002, or the ship constructed before the date will comply with the chapter, which was enforced prior to the date. For ships which undergo repairs, alterations, and modifications shall continue to comply with at least the requirements previously applicable to such ships. There are 5 objectives for the fire safety objective of this chapter. The first is to prevent occurrence of fire explosion. Reduce the risk to life caused by fire. Reduce the risk of life caused by fire to the ship, its cargo, and the environment. Fourth, contain, control, and suppress fire explosion in the compartment of origin. Fifth, provide adequate and readily accessible means of escape for passengers and crew.
I will explain about Part B, Prevention Fire and Explosion. Prevent the ignition of flammable substances or flammable liquid while on board. This topic is covered under Regulation 4. This is to ensure the safety of the entire ship to prevent unwanted things from happening, such as fires on board caused by flammable materials carried by the ship. For example, explosive, flammable gas, flammable liquid, and flammable solid. Moreover, the topic for fire growth potential is covered under Regulation 5. Fires can be largely prevented by providing effective lagging on hot surfaces such as generator turbocharger, various steam pipes, and pipes carrying hot oil. There are few types of detectors used on ship. For example, heat detectors and smoke detectors. Smoke generation potential and toxicity is covered under Regulation 6, lowering the risk of death from smoke and harmful compounds produced by a fire in areas where people often work or live. The creation of smoke depends on a number of different combinations of variables, and prolonged exposure increases the risk of suffocation and intoxication. Next, Part C, Suppression of Fire. The topic for detection and alarm is covered under Regulation 7. Systems for detecting fires are created to discover fires at early stage when there is still time for occupants to escape safely. The safety of those who respond to emergency is greatly benefited by early detection. Alarm must be used with detectors for them to be effective.
In Regulation 8, which is about controlling the spread of smoke and reducing the risk associated with it, this law may be applied in circumstances where in smoke extraction system used in ship atriums, the needed smoke detection system must be able to manually engage the smoke extraction system. Next is Regulation 9 that covered the topic of fire containment or keeping a fire out of its source space. For example, a fixed frost fire extinguishing system must be installed on every ship that wants to anchor as one of the precautions to deal with any fire that may break out inside a ship. The suppression and fast extinguishment of a fire in the space of origin has been explored in relation to firefighting in Regulation 10. According to this, a fire that develops on a ship that is involved in an accident must be put out quickly and without any delay. Finally, the Regulation 11 focuses on structural integrity, which aims to prevent partial or complete collapse of ship structures owing to heat-induced strength degradation. This rule discusses to always check that the ship's structure is still intact before a fire causes the structure to collapse, sustain damage, or become worse as a result of a fire.
Next, for the Part D, which is escape. In this part have two regulations, which is Regulation 12 and Regulation 13. Regulation 12 is notification of crew and passengers. This regulation is to notify crew and passengers for safety evacuations. It's a basic condition for them to escape some emergency situations such as fire broke out on the ship. They have to receive the true notification so they can escape within a critical time. For the Regulation 13, means of escape. The purpose of this regulation is to provide means of escape so that people on board can safely and swiftly to escape. Some example for means of escape include lifeboat and life raft. If a boat or cruise serial fire broke up, lifeboat is the most important tool to help them escape from the ship. So that means every ship must provide enough and functional means of escape to ensure the safety of people on board. Comes to the Part E, operational requirements. Part E have included 3 regulations. They are Regulation 14, 15, and 16. Regulation 14, operational readiness and maintenance. This regulation is to maintain and monitor the effectiveness of the fire safety measure equipped on board the ship to ensure all fire systems on board are functional in case the emergency. Example, the firefighting equipment and system must be thoroughly tested and inspected by crews. Regulation 15, instructions, onboard training and drills. The purpose of this regulation is to reduce the back effect of fire by proper instructions for training and drills. The regulation is very important to all people on board. They have the responsible for carrying out ship procedures under emergency conditions. All the instructions, training, and drills is to let them more familiar to respond for the emergency situations. When they are familiar with the process, they will naturally know how to handle with the fire broke out. Followed by the Regulation 16 is operations. Purpose of operation is to provide information and instructions for proper ship and cargo handling operations in relation to fire safety. To let them know more information about fire safety to avoid and prevent it. The booklet of fire safety must provide on board. It must include relevant detail and instructions for safe operation. Next, come to the part F, alternative design and arrangements. And this part only have one regulation, which is alternative design and arrangement. Purpose of this regulation is to provide a good method for approving alternative design and arrangement for fire safety. The alternative design and arrangements of the ship must meet fire safety objective and functional criteria. That means adoption is only possible for qualified alternative design arrangements for the ship.
Next, I will talk about Part G, which is special requirement. There are 6 regulations in this part, from Regulation 18 to Regulation 23. Regulation 18 is helicopter facilities. The purpose of this regulation is to provide additional fire safety for ships with special requirement for helicopter. The requirement for this regulation is helideck and helicopter operation must be able to function well to protect ships from any fire incident. All ships should be equipped with helideck, and helideck must be made of steel or any other material that have the same quality with steel. Usually, helideck will be used during firefighting and rescue personnel. For this regulation, there are few requirements that should be complied to the ships, such as firefighting appliance, drainage facilities, and helicopter refueling and hangar facilities. Regulation 19 is carriage of dangerous goods. The purpose for this regulation is for fire system protection to protect ships that carrying dangerous cargo. The general requirement for this purpose is ship type and cargo space for carriage of dangerous cargo shall meet the specifications that needed. Regulation 20 is protection of vehicle, special categories, and ro-ro space. In this regulation, there are few requirements that needed, such as application, basic principle for passenger, precaution against ignitions of flammable vapors in closed vehicle space, closed ro-ro space, special category space, detection and alarm, structural protection, and fire extinction. Regulation 21 is casualty threshold, safe return to port, and safe areas. This regulation is to form a criteria for a ship to return to port by itself after an incident and provide requirements that function well and operation standard for safe area. In these regulations, safe return to port means ship should be able to return to safe area. Regulation 22 is design criteria for system to remain operational after a fire incident. The purpose is to establish a system that can be operated to support ship evacuations and ship abandonment. The last regulation on this chapter is Regulation 23, Safety Center on Passenger Ships. The purpose of this regulation is to give place for the management during emergency situation. In this regulation, location, arrangement, layout, and ergonomic design is important during emergency to prevent any distraction to the watch officer. Communication is also important between every crew member during the fire incident.
A good example of case study for this chapter is the fire incident of the passenger vessel PJV on 18 January of 2016. The New Zealand passenger vessel PJV was on an excursion trip from Wakatane to White Island. The ship had 53 passengers and 7 crew members on board. It was approaching the Wakatane harbour entrance when fire broke out in the engine room. The fire was suppressed for a short time after the crew released a fixed CO2 fire extinguisher in the engine room. However, the quick escalation of fire quick forced the captain to order everyone to abandon the vessel without further fire extinction attempt. Several passengers were forced to enter the water without a life jacket before the ship was burned and eventually sank. Fortunately, everyone was rescued by the vessels in the vicinity that responded to the captain's distress call. Nobody was seriously injured. After an investigation by the New Zealand Transport Accident Investigation Commission, there are 3 main issues identified in this incident. The first issue is the absence of a fire alarm system that caused the crew to have limited opportunity to respond to the fire and prepare life-saving equipment. The ship should be installed with fire detection or automatic fire alarm because it could carry up to 90 passengers and operate up to 12 nautical miles from the coast. Second issue is the ineffectiveness of the fixed CO2 firefighting system. There were openings that allow air into the engine room because the space was not fully closed down and isolated. Additionally, the third issue is a difficulty for smaller vessel operators to choose where to locate the life-saving equipment even though the mentioned equipment was appropriately placed on board. Thus, 3 key lessons can be concluded from this chapter to be referred in the future. First, as mentioned in Regulation 7, detection and alarm in SOLAS Chapter 2.2, early detection of fire on board with installed fire detection and alarm system is critical to successfully respond to the fire by preparing life-saving equipment early. The second lesson is that the crew must be fully trained and familiar with the use of firefighting system on board as mentioned in Regulation 15. Thirdly, the designer of the ship should fully document and understand how the fixed CO2 firefighting system works, as it will be only effective if space it protects it can be fully closed off.